The neon lights of Las Vegas Boulevard cast garish shadows across the neighborhood streets as Halloween Night 2024 descended upon the city. While tourists crowded the Strip in elaborate costumes, seeking thrills in the casinos, a different kind of horror was unfolding in a modest home on the city's northwest side. At 6:47 a.m. on November 1st, dispatch received a frantic 911 call from a teenage girl claiming an intruder had murdered her father during the night's festivities. What began as an apparent Halloween tragedy would transform into one of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's most disturbing investigations of the year. Detective Marcus Rivera had been with LVMPD for 18 years, long enough to know that the city's glittering facade concealed darkness in unexpected places. As he navigated his unmarked vehicle through the quiet residential streets that morning, the remnants of Halloween celebrations littered the sidewalks, discarded candy wrappers, smashed pumpkins, toilet paper draped across trees. The Anderson residence stood apart from its decorated neighbors, a simple, ranch-style home with peeling paint and a small yard where fake cobwebs still clung to the bushes. Yellow crime scene tape already cordoned off the property when Rivera arrived, uniformed officers maintaining the perimeter as curious neighbors gathered in clusters, their Halloween decorations creating a macabre backdrop to the unfolding tragedy. Inside the home, the contrast between holiday cheer and violent death struck Rivera immediately. Orange and black streamers hung from the ceiling, a bowl of untouched candy sat on the kitchen counter, and carved pumpkins grinned from the windowsills. But down the hallway, past family photographs showing happier times, lay the body of Michael Anderson, a 45-year-old mathematics teacher at Desert Vista High School. He had been shot multiple times in his bed, the sheets soaked crimson, his eyes still open in what appeared to be surprise or shock. The medical examiner's preliminary assessment suggested death had occurred between 3 and 5:30 that morning, roughly 8 hours before his daughter's emergency call. Sophia Anderson sat wrapped in a blanket in the living room, her elaborate witch costume from the previous night's Halloween party disheveled and streaked with what appeared to be stage makeup, mixed with genuine tears. The 17-year-old told responding officers she had returned home around midnight from a friend's party, gone to bed around 1 in the morning, and slept until she heard gunshots sometime after 6. She claimed to have hidden in her closet, terrified, until she was certain the intruder had fled. Only then had she ventured out to discover her father's body and immediately called for help. Her story seemed plausible. The forced window in the living room, the missing electronics and cash, her convincing display of shock and grief. Detective Rivera studied the teenager as Officer Chen took her initial statement. Something about her demeanor triggered his investigative instincts, though he couldn't articulate exactly what bothered him. She displayed appropriate distress, crying at the right moments, her voice breaking when describing the discovery of her father's body. Yet beneath the performance, and Rivera's experienced eye recognized it as such, something felt rehearsed. The way she anticipated questions before they were fully asked, how her explanations came perhaps too readily, without the confusion and fragmentation typical of genuine trauma. Rivera made a mental note to request a full background check and forensic analysis of her electronic devices, standard procedure in any homicide investigation, but especially critical when family members were present at the scene. The crime scene itself presented numerous inconsistencies that immediately caught Rivera's attention. The allegedly forced window showed pry marks on the exterior frame, but the pattern seemed oddly uniform, almost textbook in appearance, as if someone had studied break-ins from television crime dramas rather than executing an actual forced entry. The glass itself was intact, only the frame disturbed, suggesting minimal effort to actually breach the window. Inside the home, despite the supposed robbery, valuable items remained untouched. A laptop sat charging on the kitchen counter. A tablet lay on the coffee table. Even Michael's expensive camera equipment remained visible on a shelf. Only his wallet and watch were missing, items that could easily be disposed of or claimed lost. Forensic technician Sarah Kim arrived with her team, immediately beginning the methodical process of documenting and collecting evidence. The murder weapon, a 9mm handgun registered to Michael Anderson himself, had been recovered from a decorative planter in the backyard, partially concealed beneath Halloween decorations. 4 spent shell casings littered the bedroom floor, positioned in a pattern that suggested a stationary shooter rather than someone moving defensively during a struggle. Blood spatter analysis indicated the first shot had been fired while Michael was lying down, likely asleep, with subsequent shots delivered as he attempted to sit up and defend himself. The final shot, based on the angle and depth of the wound, appeared to have been fired from very close range. "Detective, you need to see this," Kim called from the bedroom doorway. She pointed to the blood pattern on the walls and ceiling, her gloved finger tracing the arterial spray. All 4 shots came from approximately the same position at the foot of the bed. There's no evidence of movement or defensive action from the shooter. This wasn't a panicked intruder, surprised to find someone home. This was execution-style shooting, methodical and deliberate. Rivera absorbed this information, his suspicions about Sophia deepening. An intruder wouldn't stand still and carefully aim multiple shots at a victim who was waking and attempting to defend himself. An intruder would fire and flee, leaving a chaotic crime scene. This scene suggested the shooter had remained calm, adjusting aim between shots, ensuring the target was neutralized. The detective's mind began constructing alternative scenarios, ones that placed Sophia Anderson in a very different role than grieving daughter. The neighborhood canvass began immediately, uniformed officers going door to door, seeking anyone who might have seen or heard something unusual during Halloween night or the early morning hours that followed. Most residents reported hearing nothing. The night had been filled with legitimate noises of celebration, fireworks, loud music, groups of costumed revelers moving between parties. Any gunshots would have been easily mistaken for Halloween theatrics in this environment. But 3 houses down, Rivera encountered Marcus Thompson, an elderly veteran with chronic insomnia who had spent much of the night sitting on his porch watching the festivities. "I didn't see anyone breaking into the Anderson place," Thompson told Rivera, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "But I did see Sophia's bedroom light going on and off repeatedly between about 3:30 and 5:30 this morning. Thought it was odd since she told everyone she'd gotten home tired from her party and went straight to bed." Rivera's pulse quickened. "You're certain about the timing?" "Absolutely. I keep track of time pretty carefully when I can't sleep. Started noticing her light around 3:30, kept flickering on and off until close to 6. Then it stayed off for a while before I heard the sirens." This contradicted Sophia's timeline completely. She claimed to have been asleep until awakened by gunshots just before calling 911 at 6:47 a.m. But if her light had been active hours earlier, during the estimated time of death, it suggested she had been awake and moving through the house precisely when her father was being murdered. Rivera thanked Thompson profusely, recognizing this information as potentially case-breaking. But he needed more. Witness testimony alone wasn't sufficient. He needed irrefutable evidence. As if in answer to his unspoken need, Officer Martinez approached with crucial information. "Detective, the house 2 doors down has one of those smart doorbell cameras with a view of the street. The owner says it records continuously and has night vision capability. If Sophia's bedroom window faces the street..." Rivera didn't wait for Martinez to finish. Within 30 minutes, he was sitting in the living room of David Chen, reviewing footage from the Ring doorbell camera that had captured the front of the Anderson home throughout Halloween night and into the following morning. The timestamp feature would prove invaluable, providing objective documentation of activity inside Sophia's bedroom at the exact times Marcus Thompson had reported seeing her light. The footage was damning. Starting at 3:22 a.m., Sophia's bedroom light could be seen illuminating through her window, the glow clearly visible in the camera's night vision mode. At 3:34 a.m., the light went dark. At 3:47 a.m., it illuminated again. This pattern continued throughout the critical time period, with particularly notable activity between 4:15 and 4:35 a.m., precisely when the medical examiner believed Michael Anderson had been killed. Rivera watched the footage multiple times, making detailed notes of each instance the light changed, creating a timeline that would later be correlated with other evidence. But the camera had captured something even more significant. At 4:22 a.m., enhanced by the doorbell's high-definition recording, a shadow could be seen moving past Sophia's window. The figure appeared to be carrying something long and cylindrical, potentially the handgun used in the murder. 8 minutes later, at 4:30 a.m., the shadow passed the window again, this time moving in the opposite direction, back toward Sophia's room. The timing aligned perfectly with the sequence of a person retrieving a weapon, committing murder, and returning to their starting position. Rivera felt the familiar sensation of a case beginning to crack open. The doorbell footage provided objective evidence that Sophia had been awake and active during the murder, directly contradicting her statement about sleeping until awakened by gunshots hours later. But motive remained unclear. Why would a teenage girl murder her father on Halloween night? The detective knew that establishing motive would be critical to building a prosecutable case. The answer began emerging when forensic technicians completed their initial processing of Sophia's bedroom. Hidden inside a heating vent, accessible through a floor register, investigators discovered clothing stained with blood spatter, jeans, and a black hoodie that Sophia had apparently changed out of after the murder, concealing them before staging her discovery of the body. More significantly, they found her smartphone, which she had reported as lost during the Halloween party. The phone's presence in the hidden compartment suggested Sophia had deliberately concealed it, likely because it contained evidence she didn't want discovered. Detective Rivera obtained an emergency search warrant for the phone's contents, citing the contradictory evidence and the phone's suspicious location. What the forensic digital team uncovered provided both motive and premeditation. Text message exchanges with a 25-year-old man named Tyler Brooks revealed an intimate relationship that had been ongoing for approximately 4 months. The messages were explicit, documenting not just an inappropriate romantic involvement, but also Michael Anderson's recent discovery of the relationship and his threat to report Brooks to authorities for statutory sexual conduct with a minor. He found everything Sophia had texted Brooks at 10:32 p.m. on October 30th, the night before the murder. All our photos, all our messages. He's calling the police tomorrow after he talks to my school counselor. He says you're a predator and he's going to make sure you go to prison. Brooks' response revealed panic. He can't do that. I'll lose my job, my apartment, everything. I could go away for years. You have to stop him. Talk him out of it. The exchange continued with increasing urgency, Sophia expressing fear of losing Brooks and describing her father as controlling and unwilling to understand their connection. The final message before the murder, sent at 11:47 p.m. on Halloween night, was chilling. I can't let him destroy us. I know what I have to do. Delete these messages and don't text me again until you hear from me. Rivera stared at the screen, the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. Motive established. Sophia believed her father's threat to report Brooks would end their relationship and result in Brooks' imprisonment. The text messages demonstrated both motive and premeditation, showing Sophia contemplating action against her father rather than ending the illegal relationship. Combined with the doorbell camera footage contradicting her alibi and the blood-stained clothing hidden in her room, the evidence was becoming overwhelming. But Rivera wanted more. Defense attorneys would argue that teenage girls say dramatic things when emotional, that text messages represented venting rather than actual intent. He needed evidence demonstrating deliberate planning, showing Sophia had researched and prepared for the crime, rather than acting impulsively. The digital forensics team provided exactly that when they recovered her laptop's browsing history. The search queries, conducted in the weeks leading up to Halloween, painted a disturbing picture of premeditation. On October 12th, how to make murder look like robbery. On October 18th, do police test family members for gunpowder residue? On October 24th, how long do deleted text messages stay on phone? Most damning, on October 29th, just 2 days before the murder, best time to shoot someone in their sleep, and where to shoot for instant death. These searches had been conducted in private browsing mode and manually deleted from the laptop's history, but forensic software recovered them from the hard drive's unallocated space. The systematic research into methods of committing and concealing murder demonstrated a level of planning inconsistent with impulsive action. Sophia Anderson hadn't acted in the heat of passion or during a momentary loss of control. She had researched, planned, and executed her father's murder with disturbing calculation. Rivera brought Sophia in for a follow-up interview, having obtained her aunt's permission as Sophia's temporary guardian. The teenager arrived at the LVMPD headquarters with her Aunt Rebecca Martinez, Michael's sister, who still believed in her niece's innocence despite the mounting evidence. In interview room 3, with the camera recording every word and gesture, Rivera began the careful process of dismantling Sophia's story, piece by piece. "Sophia, I need you to walk me through Halloween night again, from the time you got home from the party," Rivera began, his tone conversational rather than accusatory. Building rapport was critical. He needed Sophia to talk, to dig herself deeper into the web of lies she had constructed. Sophia repeated her previous account almost word for word, describing returning home around midnight, her father already asleep, going to her room and sleeping until awakened by gunshots after 6 in the morning. Her delivery was smooth, rehearsed, exactly as Rivera expected. He noted her body language, steady eye contact, minimal fidgeting, controlled breathing. She was performing well, confident in her narrative. "That's interesting," Rivera said casually, pulling out printed stills from the doorbell camera footage, "because we have video evidence showing your bedroom light going on and off repeatedly between 3:30 and 5:30 a.m. Can you explain why your light was on if you were sleeping?" For the first time, a crack appeared in Sophia's composure. Her eyes widened slightly. Her breathing quickened. Maybe I got up to use the bathroom. I don't remember clearly." "The footage shows your light changing dozens of times over 2 hours. That's a lot of bathroom trips." Rivera slid another image across the table, this one showing the shadow moving past her window. "And there's this, a figure carrying something past your window at 4:22 a.m., right around when your father was killed. Any idea who that might be?" Sophia stared at the image, her mind visibly racing to construct an explanation. "Maybe it was the intruder. Maybe they went past my window on their way to Dad's room. The shadow is moving from inside your room, Sophia." The camera angle makes that clear. And it returns 8 minutes later, going back toward your room. The intruder theory doesn't account for that. The teenager's confident facade was crumbling. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to maintain composure. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I was asleep. Maybe I was sleepwalking? That happens sometimes when I'm stressed." Rivera introduced the blood-stained clothing next, describing exactly where it had been found. Sophia attempted to explain it away. Perhaps her father's blood had transferred when she discovered his body, and she'd hidden the clothes in shock, not thinking clearly. But when confronted with the blood spatter pattern, which forensic analysis indicated could only have been created if Sophia had been standing approximately 3 feet from her father when the fatal shot was fired, her explanations became increasingly desperate and contradictory. The turning point came when Rivera placed printouts of the text messages with Tyler Brooks on the table. Sophia's face went pale as she recognized her own words. "I can't let him destroy us. I know what I have to do." "Your father discovered your relationship with a 25-year-old man," Rivera stated, no longer framing it as a question. "He was going to report Tyler to police for sexual conduct with a minor. You and Tyler discussed this threat. And then, less than 12 hours before your father was killed, you sent this message about knowing what you had to do." "Help me understand what that meant, Sophia." The teenager's composure shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to maintain her innocence. "It wasn't like that. Tyler and I love each other. Dad didn't understand. He was going to ruin everything. But I didn't. I wouldn't." Rivera pressed forward, knowing this was the critical moment. "We recovered your internet search history, Sophia. How to make murder look like robbery. Where to shoot for instant death. You researched this for weeks. This wasn't an accident or a moment of panic. You planned to kill your father." For several minutes, Sophia sat in silence, her legal right to remain silent warring with what appeared to be an overwhelming need to explain, to justify, to make someone understand. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began to talk. He was going to destroy Tyler's life, she said, her gaze fixed on the table, rather than meeting Rivera's eyes. Tyler would have gone to prison for years, lost everything. And for what? Because we love each other? Because I'm not quite 18 yet? It's just a stupid law that doesn't account for real feelings. Rivera listened without interruption as Sophia described her thinking in the weeks before Halloween. She had considered running away with Tyler, but they had no money and nowhere to go. She had tried to convince her father that the relationship wasn't harmful, but Michael had been adamant about reporting it to authorities. In Sophia's mind, she faced an impossible choice: lose Tyler forever, or remove the obstacle preventing them from being together. I didn't want to hurt Dad, she continued, tears flowing freely now. I loved him, but he left me no choice. He was so stubborn, so convinced Tyler was taking advantage of me. He wouldn't listen to reason. The confession continued with chilling detail. Sophia described retrieving her father's handgun from his bedroom safe. The combination was his birthday, something both of them knew. She had stood in his doorway for nearly 15 minutes, gun in hand, trying to summon the courage to pull the trigger. The first shot had been the hardest, she explained, but once it was done, she had to finish it. Leaving him wounded and suffering would have been cruel. After the murder, Sophia had hidden the gun in the backyard planter, changed her blood-stained clothes and concealed them in the heating vent, and then waited several hours before calling 911. She had spent that time researching how to clean gunpowder residue from her hands and rehearsing her story about the intruder. The forced window had been staged after the murder, pried from the outside using tools from the garage to make it appear someone had broken in. Throughout the confession, Rivera maintained a neutral expression, though internally he felt deep sadness at the waste of 2 lives. Michael Anderson's life taken violently, and Sophia's life destroyed by her own actions. When the teenager finally fell silent, Rivera asked the question that would haunt him for months afterward. Do you feel remorse for killing your father? Sophia considered this for a long moment before responding. I feel bad that it happened. I wish there had been another way. But Dad forced me to make this choice. He wouldn't compromise, wouldn't consider that maybe Tyler and I had something real. So in a way, he's responsible too. The complete absence of genuine remorse in this statement, the externalization of blame onto the victim, struck Rivera as deeply disturbing. Sophia Anderson had murdered her father in cold blood, planned the crime for weeks, and still viewed herself as the wronged party forced into desperate action. This wasn't a teenager who had made a tragic mistake in a moment of passion. This was someone fundamentally disconnected from normal emotional and moral responses. The investigation's final phase focused on Tyler Brooks, whose involvement remained unclear. Cell tower data placed his phone within a mile of the Anderson home between 2 and 4:30 on Halloween morning, contradicting his claim of being at a party across town. Surveillance footage from a convenience store showed Brooks purchasing a prepaid phone 2 days before the murder, and that phone had pinged off the tower nearest the Anderson residence at 4:10 a.m. before being permanently deactivated. When detectives brought Brooks in for questioning, he initially denied any knowledge of Sophia's plans beyond what was evident in their text exchanges. But confronted with the cell tower data and the prepaid phone purchase, his story began to evolve. He admitted being near the Anderson home that morning, waiting as a potential getaway driver if Sophia needed to flee. But when she never emerged and his nerve failed, he had destroyed the burner phone and returned home, convincing himself he had imagined the entire plan. I never thought she would actually do it, Brooks told detectives, his head in his hands. We talked about how unfair the situation was, how her dad was overreacting, but I figured she was just venting. When I realized she was serious, I should have called police, should have warned someone. Instead, I just ran. Brooks was charged as an accessory after the fact for his role in providing support and failing to prevent a crime he knew was being planned. But Rivera focused his primary attention on Sophia Anderson, the 17-year-old girl who would face adult charges for the first-degree murder of her father. The evidence package was comprehensive. the doorbell camera footage destroying her alibi, the text messages establishing motive and premeditation, the internet search history showing weeks of planning, the blood-stained clothing hidden in her room, and ultimately, her own confession detailing how and why she had executed Michael Anderson while he slept. The forensic evidence told the complete story. Gunshot residue tests on Sophia's hands showed heavy concentrations consistent with firing a weapon. DNA analysis of skin cells on the handgun's grip matched Sophia's genetic profile. Financial records revealed she had attempted to access her father's bank accounts in the hours before the murder, trying to secure funds for her planned escape with Brooks. The gun safe showed no signs of forced entry. Only someone who knew the combination could have accessed the weapon. Michael Anderson's colleagues and students at Desert Vista High School expressed shock and grief when learning of the circumstances surrounding his death. A beloved teacher, known for staying late to help struggling students, organizing math competitions, and serving as faculty advisor to multiple clubs, Michael had been planning to attend a mathematics conference in Phoenix the week after Halloween. His classroom materials were prepared weeks in advance, his lesson plans detailed and thoughtful, evidence of a dedicated educator with much left to contribute. "Mr. Anderson changed my life," one former student told reporters. "I was failing algebra and thought I was just stupid. He stayed after school 3 times a week for 2 months helping me, never giving up on me. I ended up getting a B and discovered I actually enjoyed math. He didn't just teach formulas, he taught us to think, to persevere, to believe we could solve difficult problems." The mathematics department created a memorial scholarship in Michael's name, ensuring his legacy as an educator would continue despite the tragic circumstances of his death. But for Detective Rivera, who had seen too many senseless homicides during his career, the Anderson case represented something particularly disturbing. A premeditated murder committed by a daughter against her father over a relationship that would likely have run its course naturally within months or years. As Halloween 2024 gave way to the holiday season, the Anderson case dominated Las Vegas media coverage. The combination of elements, Halloween night, a teenage killer, an inappropriate relationship with an older man, and the weeks of calculated planning, captured public attention in ways that more typical homicides did not. Legal analysts debated whether Sophia's age should prevent her from being charged as an adult, while child development experts discussed adolescent brain function and capacity for long-term decision-making. For Rivera, the case was straightforward regardless of these broader debates. Sophia Anderson had committed first-degree murder with extensive premeditation. She had researched methods, planned the execution, and carried it out with disturbing precision. Her age might be a factor in sentencing, but it didn't change the fundamental facts of the crime. A man who had devoted his life to education and to raising his daughter alone after his wife's death had been murdered in his sleep by that same daughter because he had tried to protect her from an illegal relationship with a predatory older man. The final piece of evidence that sealed the case came from Michael Anderson's personal journal, discovered during a thorough search of his bedroom. The entries from his final weeks of life revealed a father struggling with how to handle his daughter's relationship with Brooks. Michael had consulted with the school counselor, researched Nevada's laws regarding statutory sexual conduct, and agonized over whether reporting Brooks would damage his relationship with Sophia. "I know she'll hate me for this," Michael had written on October 28th, just 4 days before his death. "But I have to protect her, even from herself." This man is 25 years old, in a position of power over a teenage girl. "If I don't act, I'm failing as a father. I'd rather have Sophia angry and safe than happy and exploited. Maybe someday she'll understand I did this because I love her." These words, written by a man who would be dead less than a week later, murdered by the daughter he was trying to protect, devastated everyone who read them. Rivera included the journal entries in his case file, recognizing them as powerful evidence of Michael Anderson's state of mind and the benign motive behind his threat to report Brooks, not control or cruelty, but genuine parental concern for his daughter's welfare. On November 15th, 2024, Detective Marcus Rivera submitted his final report on the investigation to the district attorney's office, recommending prosecution of Sophia Anderson for first-degree murder and Tyler Brooks as an accessory. The evidence package was comprehensive, the chain of custody impeccable, and the case as solid as Rivera had ever built during his career. But as he closed the file and prepared to move on to the next case in his perpetually full caseload, he felt none of the satisfaction that typically accompanied solving a complex homicide. The Anderson case would haunt Rivera for years, not because of any investigative failures or unresolved questions. The evidence was conclusive and Sophia's confession had left no doubt, but because of what it represented. A teenage girl had murdered her father, the person who loved her most in the world, over a relationship that was illegal, inappropriate, and statistically unlikely to have lasted regardless of Michael's intervention. The calculus Sophia had performed, weighing her father's life against her temporary romantic attachment, represented a fundamental failure of moral development that Rivera found profoundly disturbing. As Las Vegas prepared for Thanksgiving, the media attention on the Anderson case began to fade, replaced by other stories, other tragedies, other sensations. But for those directly involved, Rebecca Martinez, who had lost her brother and, in a different way, her niece, the students at Desert Vista High School, who mourned a beloved teacher, and Detective Rivera, who carried the weight of another solved homicide that brought no real closure. The Halloween horror of 2024 would remain vividly present, a reminder of how quickly ordinary lives could be shattered by violence born of desperation, manipulation, and tragically poor judgment. The doorbell camera that had captured the crucial evidence sat unchanged on David Chen's front porch, continuing to record the daily activities of a residential street where Halloween decorations were replaced by Thanksgiving turkeys and then Christmas lights. The technology that had broken open the case became a silent testament to how modern surveillance had transformed criminal investigation, creating a world where even carefully planned crimes could be undone by evidence the perpetrator never anticipated. In interview room 3 at LVMPD headquarters, the recording of Sophia Anderson's confession remained in the evidence archive, her voice preserved, stating, "I know what I have to do." And later, "Dad forced me to make this choice." These words, spoken by a 17-year-old girl who had researched murder techniques, executed her father with clinical precision, and then attempted to stage an elaborate cover-up, would eventually be played for a jury tasked with determining her fate. But that was a question for the justice system, for prosecutors and defense attorneys, and ultimately, 12 citizens who would be asked to judge whether a teenage girl who had planned and carried out parricide deserved to be punished as an adult or treated as a juvenile whose developing brain had led her to commit an uncharacteristic act she would later regret. Detective Marcus Rivera's role was complete. He had investigated the crime, collected the evidence, and delivered a case that established beyond reasonable doubt who had killed Michael Anderson and why. As Rivera drove home through the Las Vegas streets on the evening he closed the case, passing the famous strip where tourists celebrated and gambled, oblivious to the small tragedy that had unfolded in a modest neighborhood miles from the neon lights, he reflected on the nature of his work. Every homicide represented the end of one life and the destruction of many others. Victims' families, killers' families, communities torn apart by violence. The Anderson case was unusual only in its specific details. The fundamental pattern of lives destroyed by poor decisions and violence was tragically familiar. Michael Anderson had been 45 years old, a dedicated teacher with decades of potential contribution remaining, a father who had sacrificed career opportunities and personal relationships to focus on raising his daughter after losing his wife. That life had been extinguished on Halloween night by Sophia Anderson, 17 years old, a girl whose father had loved her unconditionally and who had repaid that love with bullets fired while he slept. The complete investigation file, now ready for prosecution, told this story with evidence that was irrefutable. Doorbell footage, text messages, internet searches, forensic analysis, and ultimately Sophia's own words confessing to the premeditated murder. Justice, Rivera had learned during his years in law enforcement, was not the same as healing or closure. Michael Anderson would remain dead regardless of Sophia's conviction or sentence. The students he would have taught, the lives he would have influenced, the future he might have built, all of that was permanently lost. The best the justice system could offer was accountability, a public recognition that what Sophia had done was wrong and carried consequences proportionate to the crime. As the case moved forward toward prosecution and trial, Detective Marcus Rivera returned to the constant flow of new investigations that characterized his work in a city where violence was unfortunately common. But the Anderson case would remain with him, filed in the mental archive of particularly disturbing crimes. The image of Michael Anderson's journal, his final written words expressing love for his daughter and determination to protect her, contrasted with Sophia's cold calculation in planning his murder, represented a kind of tragedy that statistics and case clearance rates could never fully capture. The Halloween horror, as local media had dubbed it, was solved. The evidence was comprehensive, the confession obtained, the suspects identified, and charged. For Detective Rivera and the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, it was simply another successful investigation, another case closed and ready for prosecution. But for those who had known Michael Anderson, for the students whose lives he had touched, and for anyone who examined the details of how a daughter had murdered her father over a doomed teenage romance, the case represented something far more disturbing, a reminder that the capacity for calculated violence could exist even in seemingly ordinary families, hidden behind normal facades until triggered by circumstances that brought darkness into the light. The investigation was complete. The question of justice was just beginning.